Welcome back. Today, we're diving into something that's really, deeply structural, but also profoundly human. We're going on a journey through Austria's social support systems. We're going to examine exactly how the state and nonprofit sectors respond to the escalation of need, starting from a simple job loss and moving all the way down to acute emergency homelessness. We'll be using official guidelines and procedural rules to see exactly how this safety net is woven together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda for today. First up, the Austrian safety net. Second, the very first step, registering as unemployed. Third, FEW support for housing loss. Fourth, the strict criteria for financial aid. And finally, Werk emergency help.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Austrian safety net.
So, we're going to look at this system completely objectively, kind of viewing it as a sequence of procedural safety nets designed to catch people at different stages of a crisis. To really wrap our heads around this explainer brings together three very different sets of official rules into one cohesive journey. We're pulling straight from the official Austrian Public Employment Service procedures, you'll hear me call it the AMS, along with the pretty dense legal guidelines from the Vienna Social Fund or FSW, and finally, the Directory of Services from the nonprofit Werk. Together they make up this massive, multi-layered support system.
Moving right along to Section 2. First step, registering as unemployed.
Okay, so this is literally the very top of our funnel, the initial, often scary life event of losing a job. According to the official AMS guidelines, the whole system is built for maximum efficiency. You just submit an application either online through their portal called MyAMS or in person at a regional office. To get the ball rolling, you have to hand over a wealth of personal and professional data. We're talking everything from your social security number and contact details to your qualifications, desired working hours, and the exact end date of your last job. In return, the system pledges to give you targeted job placement support.
And this actually brilliantly illustrates a major distinction baked right into the bureaucracy. The AMS officially separates applying for actual financial unemployment benefits, like the actual money, from just registering for a job search. If you don't need or even want the financial aid, you can totally just use the system's placement services to find a new job or apprenticeship without ever triggering that whole financial evaluation process.
But if you do need the financial support, timing is absolutely everything. The system actually lets you be super proactive here. You can officially apply for benefits up to 3 weeks before the actual start of your unemployment, assuming you already know the exact date your current job ends. Basically, the state wants you in the system before that gap in your income even hits. But listen, receiving these funds comes with some incredibly strict stipulations. Just looking at the official AMS documentation, it literally says, you must be ready to take up a new employment. You are obligated to strive for the position mediated by the AMS. So it's very much a reciprocal contract, right? The financial support is totally contingent on your active, demonstrable willingness to get back into the workforce and accept the placements they find for you. But what happens when job placement just isn't enough, or the crisis deepens? That pushes us further down the funnel to a much more severe crisis, the threat of actually losing your home.
Which brings us to Section 3, FSW support for housing loss.
Here, we transition over to the guidelines of the Fonds Sociales Vienne, or FSW. Just to ground us for a second, here is the official cover of the specific funding directive from the Vienna Social Fund, valid from July 2026. This isn't just some glossy brochure. These are the strict legal rules governing housing support and homelessness intervention in Vienna. It outlines exactly who gets funded, how facilities are recognized, and what the overarching goals of the city's intervention actually are.
Now, what's really interesting about this legal text is how it cuts right through common jargon. Section 2 of the FSW guidelines draws a really strict legal line between being roofless and being houseless. So roofless applies to individuals lacking a fixed residence who are sleeping out in public spaces or in basic night shelters. Houseless, on the flip side, refers to folks who don't have their own home but are currently living in institutional facilities, transitional housing, or women's shelters. It's a crucial bureaucratic distinction because it dictates the specific type of aid required.
But regardless of whether someone is officially classified as roofless or houseless, the foundational philosophy of the FSW is written right into its very first section. The ultimate goal of all their support is the regaining of an individually suitable form of housing for self-determined living. In other words, the system is fundamentally designed not as a permanent crutch, but as a transitional mechanism to push the individual back toward full independence. But actually getting that transitional help? Well, it's not simple.
And that leads us to Section 4, strict criteria for financial aid.
Section 4 of the FSW guidelines lays out a pretty dense list of prerequisites. To get housing aid, it's not enough to just be homeless. You have to prove a social emergency and a concrete need for support. You've got to show a clear willingness to accept help and cooperate with the system. You have to meet specific minimum income standards, which are often tied to standard minimum security benefits. You must prove you have absolutely no usable wealth. You generally have to be an Austrian citizen or hold a legally equivalent status like recognized asylum. And finally, you must prove your center of life has been in Vienna for at least the last 6 months. That's a lot of hurdles, right?
However, the legal framework actually does have some built-in flexibility for extreme scenarios. The text specifically notes that exceptions to that strict 6-month Vienna residency rule can be made in, quote, particularly worthy cases. This ensures that the rigid bureaucracy has sort of an escape valve to avoid severe social hardship if someone happens to fall through the geographical cracks.
There's also this fascinating clawback provision regarding personal assets. The system basically dictates that you must use your own wealth first. But even more striking, if a recipient acquires sufficient wealth within 3 years after receiving the aid, they are legally obligated to replace the funds. The state essentially views this aid as a strict emergency intervention, and it fully expects repayment if the individual's financial situation drastically and quickly turns around. But what if you can't meet those strict FSW criteria? What if you don't have the right citizenship status, or you can't prove your income, or you literally just arrived in the city? Well, this takes us down to the very bottom of the funnel, providing acute emergency support when those bureaucratic boxes simply cannot be checked right away.
Let's move to Section 5, Vinzi Work, Emergency Help.
This builds a completely different kind of safety net. Vinci-Verka doesn't just offer one giant one-size-fits-all shelter, they offer highly categorized, specialized facilities for very specific demographics. Just looking at their directory, they have Vinzidorf acting as a permanent shelter for men, while Haus Rosalie is an emergency sleeping place specifically for women in need. Crucially, they have Vinzi Nest for poverty migrants and Vinziport for EU citizens. These are groups that often fail to meet the strict residency or citizenship criteria required by the state-funded FSW programs we just looked at.
And Vinziverk's acute care goes way beyond just offering a bed. Their directory includes services like Vinzi Markt and Vinzi Shop, which provide affordable groceries and clothing. They recognize that acute survival requires a holistic approach to the most basic human needs: food, warmth, and shelter, provided with incredibly low barriers to entry.
So we've followed the structural roadmap of this safety net, right? From the strict placement obligations of the AMS, through the heavily regulated housing support of the Vienna Social Fund, all the way down to the specialized, barrier-free emergency shelters of Vinziverka. It's like this vast, interconnected puzzle designed to catch people as they fall. But having seen all this, it leaves us with a really vital question to chew on. As we analyze how this safety net catches those falling from job loss to acute homelessness, how can social policy further evolve to prevent that initial fall from happening in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.